When I mention the word Bethesda, different people are gonna have different reactions. Some might say, oh, Bethesda, that's the census-designated place in Maryland. Why don't they just call it a city? Some might say Bethesda, one of the best RPG-making studios of all time. Some might say Bethesda, the bane of my every waking moment. When I get out of bed, I scream, knowing that Bethesda is still making money, and I defecate loudly and painfully into my toilet, staring Todd Howard in the eye as I strain, sending him telepathic signals that I want nothing for his momentary existence but shit and pain. Some people would probably say, yeah, I mean, Skyrim was pretty good. Some might say, did you hear about the new Fallout show? It's made by the Westworld Guardians. You want to see my fucking Fallout-inspired fridge? It's filled with Nuka-Colas. And you want to see my $50,000 Fallout bunker that I built because I think that the world is gonna get bombed? Look, the point is, there's a lot of opinions out there about Bethesda. And no, not the census-designated place, but the game-developing studio, which started all the way back in 1986 when the friggin' dinos roamed around and video games looked like this. Despite the divided opinions, I think we can all agree that Bethesda's games and innovations within them has made a lasting impact on gaming history and redefined the open world. If we can hopefully all agree to that, how does so much of the internet hate Bethesda to the point where Todd Howard has become to some a living meme, less of a man and more of a target for unfunny and overdone jokes? Today I'd like to take some time to discuss how we got here and the state of where we're at now, because I think there's a lot that's worth discussing. There's a larger conversation I want to have here, one that connects to Starfield, but I want to start by looking very closely at the Fallout franchise, because we have reference for Fallout games made before and after Bethesda got their grubby nubs on the franchise, so this, I think, gives us the best lens to view Bethesda through, like an ant through a magnifying glass on a blistering summer afternoon. Are you feeling it now, Mr. Krabs? This discussion also coincides with the release of a new Fallout TV show, one which I'm quite interested in as a fan of the series, so I'm hoping this video can also serve as somewhat of an overall discussion and critique of the franchise for possible newcomers to the world. To give a bit of extremely abridged background to the overall franchise, the first Fallout game came out back in 1997, back when McDonald's was offering the Big Mac for just 55 fucking cents. With the purchase of a small fry and drink. Can you imagine that? A 55-cent burger? With the purchase of a small fry and drink. In this economy? Fallout started as an RPG sci-fi game set in a dark yet refreshingly goofy, war-ravished post-apocalyptic world inspired by the likes of Mad Max and a boy and his dog. With the backstory being that in the year 2077, a great war started with atomic bombs being dropped all across the world, destroying the planet and turning the Earth to rubble and eradicated soil. So how did you survive, you ask? Well, atomic bunkers called vaults were built all across the US to protect some lucky stragglers from devastation. A number of people on the surface survived too, some becoming zombie-like ghouls, some remaining mostly intact. In Fallout 1, you play as a lucky vault dweller, a multiple generational survivor who's leaving the vault for the first time 200 years after the initial bombing, embarking on your journey simply with the goal of finding a new water pump for your relatively small vault. Fallout 1 and the following 3, published by Interplay Entertainment and developed by Black Isle Studios, were very much games of that era, likely inspired by the likes of Wasteland, Master of Magic, Jagged Alliance, Alfred Chicken, and other 90s RPGs, fueled by the creativity, freedom, and slightly homoerotic vibes of late-night Dungeons & Dragons sessions. That D&D inspiration was channeled into a feeling of unlimited outcomes, branching paths, most of them ending in a very swift death. You can do anything. Kill anyone, steal anything, go anywhere. Sure, your goal is to get a water pump, but it becomes clear that in order to get there, you're gonna have to do a bunch of random shit along the way, with each new location in the game providing more and more quests to embark on. To the layman, aka me, who hasn't played many old PC games, this felt kind of reminiscent of old point-and-click games like Monkey Island, except every encounter basically has a number of solutions and allows you to solve problems in the way that you want to. Inevitably, you will at some point probably have to do some fighting though, and inevitably you're gonna die. You're gonna die a lot. You're gonna die a lot. And inevitably at some point you will think of smashing your fucking computer screen with your bare knuckles, because playing games before autosave technology existed feels like getting a coffee enema with a nut twist on the side, over and over again. Forever. I wouldn't know what that feeling would be like, by the way. I mean, I was just taking like an educated guess, right? I mean, that'd be so weird if I knew what that felt like, right? I mean, you'd think that would be weird, right? I think right? Or do you think it would be cool? No, yeah, that'd be so weird. Or would it be cool? No, yeah. Or, wait, what'd you say? The old Fallout games can feel pretty fucking dated now, with clunky controls and awkward combat, but the writing and vaguely nostalgic world is what made the game stand out, with truly memorable factions, locations, and characters which sucked gamers straight into their CRT monitors, their bodies floating over the massive stacks of empty Dunkaroos and Kid Cuisine branding poles. Fallout quickly gained a cult-like following, the unique setting and tone and sharp writing style setting it apart from similar RPG games of the era, which is why Interplay continued to pump more games out, baby. 1 and 2 are certified hood classics, and Fallout Factions is pretty well regarded, but it isn't made by Black Isle, and God fucking forbid, we do not talk about Fallout Brotherhood of Steel. At least, you know, that's what I've seen online. I've never played the game, I don't know. It's probably not that bad. Interplay and Black Isle, though, were meant to reunite like the Avengers in a main series 3rd Fallout game in the works. Project name, Van Buren, which aimed to bring Fallout into the next generation with a brand new 3D engine and a dual combat system, which included the turn-based combat of old Fallouts, but merged it with real-time combat like we know Fallout 4 now. Unfortunately, in 2003, the project was canceled due to some financial problems, aka they didn't have any fucking money. Black Isle, as a result, died. Shot in the back of the fucking head, and pockets rummaged through for all their remaining caps by Interplay. R.I.P. Enter Bethesda. Stage, Schleft. Bethesda saw something in Fallout. Something that the fans of the series saw and enjoyed too, but with big old dollar signs in mind too. Bethesda made a 3-game deal with Interplay in June of 2004 after the cancellation of Van Buren. Interplay wasn't completely ready to give up the franchise. They had a plan to eventually release a Fallout MMO dubbed Fallout Online. Smart strategy, I think, right? Let Bethesda bring more attention and new fans to the franchise so you can get more and more interest built for an online game. As years went by and Interplay continued to have financial issues though, they eventually just offered the franchise outright to Bethesda in 2007, to which Bethesda gladly indulged for a nice little sum of $5.75 million. For comparison, if Interplay had a time machine and could go back to 1997 with that kind of dough, they could acquire 10,454,545 Big Macs, with the purchase of 10,454,545 small fries and drinks. Just a year after acquiring the full rights to Fallout, Bethesda released Fallout 3 using the engine of the incredibly successful Oblivion. Fallout 3, similar to Oblivion, was very focused on world building and exploration, in this case, putting you in the real 3D space of a fallen Washington, D.C., doing something visually with the franchise that Interplay and Black Isle, for that matter, had only ever dreamed of. This game is also kind of historic as well because it was Todd Howard's directorial debut, baby, that's right. The big T prior to Fallout 3 was an executive producer, one of the leads, but not anymore. No. Todd had assumed his throne and he doesn't plan to give it up without a fucking fight. When it comes to Fallout 3, the story was fine, and the dialogue did a decent enough job of nailing that dark and silly humor that Fallout should, pleasing fans of both the Fallout franchise and fans of Bethesda's open world games at large. Some lore was slapped around and twisted to Bethesda's liking, and some of the true RPG elements of the game were either dumbed down or a lot less necessary than in previous entries, but overall, the sentiment on release was positive, give or take some angry forum posters. Following this success, Bethesda wanted to focus on their next game, Skyrim, but they decided in the meantime to give some money to a small RPG making studio, Obsidian, to take the T-posed glitched carcass of Fallout 3 and make a new Fallout game in it. They chose Obsidian because a number of the core developers from the original Fallout games had moved from Interplay to Obsidian, so they knew the franchise well already. It was a friggin' no-brainer. But we'll get to New Vegas later. So let's start this conversation with an important question I've seen thrown around. Does Bethesda actually make RPGs? Now, admittedly, I haven't played every single Bethesda game, but in my opinion, yeah. I mean, by definition, yes, they do. A better question I would have asked if I wasn't a dumbass idiot would probably be, what is an RPG? And for that, the simple answer is a fucking role-playing game. It's a game where you play a role that you choose. By that, admittedly vague-ass definition, there's a ton of different games that can be considered RPGs, but, you know, we'll come back to that too. Recently, I've played a lot of Bethesda games and come to some conclusions that I haven't heard too many people talking about, so my plan is to take you along on my journey, giving some juicy ass deets on my experience and hopefully making some interesting points along the way, asking some questions about Bethesda and how and why their public perception has changed, and how Fallout is emblematic of that change. I'm gonna try my best to do this without any major plot spoilers, and any spoilers that do come up will be clearly labeled, but look, it's an overview, all right? I'll be talking about these games mechanics in detail, so if you don't want to know literally anything about these games, then why the fuck did you turn on this video? No, I mean seriously, what the fuck is wrong with you? What are you, fucking stupid? Turn it off. Now. You're done. I'm not mad, I'm disappointed. The plan is to start by discussing Fallout 2, then New Vegas, then 4, then 76. I know that might seem like random choices, but if you stick with it, I think I make my case as to why I chose those specifically. I really would recommend sitting through all of it, even if you don't think you're interested in all of them, because I was shocked to learn some of the things I'll be talking about today, and it all should build to some larger conclusions. But look, the sections are marked in the play bar, so go fucking nuts. Click around your small malformed heart's desire. And if you just want to watch the last minute of the video, be my goddamn guest.
Especially because that's the part where I ask you to like and subscribe.
So, welcome. Welcome to this video, this discussion of Fallout, to my channel, as this is only my second video I've ever made. And yeah, we're gonna kick things off by talking about one of the most beloved Fallout games of all time, Fallout 2. Enjoy your stay in the wasteland, my friends. It's hotter than the Mojave out there.
Look at the score. Radium. Are working to win.
Look, contrary to popular belief, I actually am aware that Fallout 2 is the second game in the series. Yeah, I know, it took a lot of work, but I reformatted my brain a few times in researching for this video and realized that the number 1 actually comes before the number 2. Who would have thunk? But look, I did try to play Fallout 1 first, a bunch of times, in fact, but I just couldn't fucking get into it. The controls felt like they were constantly fighting against me. I was just punching rats over and over because I couldn't figure out how my inventory worked. And I was carelessly choosing my character traits and perks, accidentally locking myself into having too few action points to really do much of anything on any of my turns in combat. Every time I gave it another shot, I'd end up frustrated after an hour or two and just give up. So I decided Fallout just wasn't for me and that I would never play another game in the series ever again. Okay, yeah, that wasn't really me being done with the franchise, because a couple of months ago, I decided to grab Fallout 2 on a steep sale of 4.5 Big Macs from the year 1997, with the purchase of 4.5 small fries and drinks. I picked it up because I had heard that it was arguably the better of the two, and I assumed, since it came out after, it might be a little more modern, perhaps a bit easier to dip my plump-ass toes into, Schneider style. Turns out it's basically the exact fucking same thing. But unlike Fallout 1, there is an actual kind of tutorial area that taught me how to do crazy shit like equipping items and moving. The shit was still clunky as fuck, and I definitely found myself pressing the wrong buttons constantly for pretty much my whole playthrough, making my character fidget around like a kid with ADHD set loose at Costco, but it felt a lot easier to get into. To talk story a little, Fallout generally as a franchise is about surviving the post-apocalypse, but not the post-apocalypse you might be used to in modern franchises filled with zombies and death. Although, yeah, I mean, that stuff is in Fallout 2. But what makes Fallout's world stand out so much is the retro-futurist aesthetic that all the games commit so hard to. You see, Fallout takes a lot of inspiration from the 50s, and the 60s, and the 70s and 80s. It's pretty vague, but essentially Fallout is parodizing the atomic bomb fears of old. The vision you might have of idyllic old America. Mom and pop getting their milk bottles delivered while the boys are outside pretending to shoot each other with guns that look, well, a little too realistic if you ask me. The cookie cutter houses, the weird food that for some reason always mixed Jell-O and fucking mayo? Like, what was going on, bro? Couldn't they eat something better? But Fallout looks a little closer here, mixing and blurring this idealistic vision with the truth of the time, that everyone was more isolated and afraid than ever, leading to the initial invention of the first antidepressant and antipsychotic in the 1950s, primarily for housewives that had nothing to do all day but stir in their thoughts and fears. Conspiracies were brewing about the government, about people's own communities, and fear was bubbling under the surface of atomic bombs, of radical communists. Early America of this time is often depicted through bright pastel advertisements and a family which was tighter together than ever. We remember Popeye taking out Bluto. We don't usually remember Popeye taking on an extremely racist depiction of Japanese people as World War II propaganda, or when Bluto was in blackface for some reason. It might feel like the conspiracy theories of new, which dominate so much of underground forums, are a fairly recent phenomena, but the truth is none of this is remotely new. It just used to travel only by word of mouth, quietly, hushed. The amount of othering and isolation that communities were really just putting on themselves at the time is pretty insane, and I think it's a bit dishonest to show old America in one pretty pastel light without also showing this dark side, the truth of the time. Well, and so does Fallout, apparently, because that's what the post-apocalypse is built on. What if these irrational fears of the entire world being nuked came to reality? But what if at the same time, all the other more positive futuristic concepts also came to be? Bright, shiny metal robot butlers, androids who walk and talk like any other human, mad scientists who can create mutant humans that basically all look like Arnold Schwarzenegger. Fallout asks, what would it look like if all of this stuff came true at once? And the result is one of the most memorable worlds in gaming history, and maybe even sci-fi in general. While all this might sound very dark, what really makes Fallout shine is its dark humor, which at least originally poked fun at all of these old Americanisms. The world is torn into factions. The people who survived are either filled with radiation poisoning or are vault dwellers. Folks who got a slot in a series of atomic bunkers known as vaults, which were thrown across America in anticipation of something awful like this occurring. The vaults are owned by a company called Vault Tech who, though most weren't aware, were actually running little experiments in most of the vaults. In Fallout 1, you are a vault dweller, and you leave your comfortable place of living to explore the real, devastated, war-torn world in search of a measly water pump, as the one in your vault is broken. Fallout 2 opens just as simply, but instead, here you're one of the descendants of the main character in Fallout 1, not a vault dweller anymore. Here, you're living in a civilization that's more reminiscent of prehistoric tribes, and your tribe in particular is dying, losing the battle to the ever-hungry world around it. But a prophecy exists, a prophecy which calls for a chosen one to come forward and find the almighty Gek, a device which was left in all of the vaults which would help the vault dwellers build a town once they were released. Well, what are the odds? You're the fucking chosen one, so time to leave your community and find this holy Gek with pretty much no more information than some cities nearby that you could go to ask around at. Well, you're the chosen one. I'm sure you'll figure it out. Having had not played these games in order and coming to Fallout 2 after the fact of playing Fallout New Vegas 3, 4, and 76, it felt like it might as well be a different goddamn series. Well, in some ways. The world and tone is instantly recognizable. The intro is as Fallout as it gets. The vault suits, the vaults themselves. It's clear that visually Bethesda did their best to take a lot of the art direction from the old Fallouts and directly translate them to 3D. The enemies here are recognizable too. Mutant geckos, ants, rad roaches, pretty much any item you can find in these old games are in the new ones too. The tone feels different, darker, and a lot more mysterious. A lot of shit being kind of obscured unless you seek it out. The humor we know and love is here in spades and probably the best it's ever been. Sometimes goofy and sometimes just really fucking dark. For example, on a side quest when you're telling a man his missing wife who you've been trying to track down is actually dead, and he responds saying he's gonna go cry, you have two responses. You can say, yeah, I'm really sorry about that, man. This is tough. Or you can say,
Yeah, go fucking cry, bitch.
Pretty fucking brutal, especially compared to how watered down the humor gets in some of the later entries. In Fallout 1 and 2, the gameplay itself is obviously very different from what we have now, with a turn-based combat that is absolutely fucking unrelenting. You wanna stab that tiny-ass dumb little stupid fucking rat? Well, good luck. Even though your melee combat skill is at like 80% and it's about a foot from your goddamn hand, you somehow only have a 50% chance you're gonna hit it at point-blank range. It also takes 4 action points to attempt a punch, and you only have 8 action points per turn. So if you want to both punch it successfully and be able to walk away after in a single turn, Well, good fucking luck. Don't even think about initiating combat with more than one enemy at a time without armor and a gun. You'll be dead within seconds. Well, you can try to just straight up run away from most encounters for the most part too, and it often is the best option if you want to leave alive. But try running away from an enemy with a fucking gun. Even though you can't hit someone for shit from more than a few steps away, try to walk and you'll get your head blown to bits by a shotgun from a fucking mile apart. Kobe! If we're thinking about Bethesda Fallout games, a large chunk of your time is spent wandering the wasteland, seeing if you can stumble upon some fun side quests while wandering the map, or just exploring abandoned buildings and shoving every single loose object in your pockets until you end up looking like Squidward after eating too many goddamn Krabby Patties. In Fallout 1 and 2, traveling is a goddamn straight up sweat fest. It's essentially a loading screen where you tap where you want to go and hope and pray to God that you don't get stopped by a group of raiders along your path, but you probably will. Getting between cities also takes a long ass time, and you can expect to hit 20 or more encounters if you're trying to go all the way across the map. Many of the encounters being unrelenting and requiring multiple save reloads just to barely make it through. Combat in the Bethesda games is quick. If you die, which doesn't tend to happen too often, you die fairly quickly and you just jump back in and try again. In the old Fallouts, taking out an enemy takes about 3 to 5 business days. Saving during combat becomes a pretty important strat, because in the middle of a successful combat encounter, you might just snap a brain cell and hit a random chance critical misfire, dropping your fucking gun on the ground, making you bend your ass over, picking up the dropped soap, while every enemy in a mile radius has a great moment to shove their gun right up your ass. Hope you saved recently. Do you have a buddy fighting with you? Probably. It's kind of necessary here to have an extra target just to take some of the heat in fights. Are they useful? Yeah. I mean, for the most part. Are they trying to shoot an enemy right next to you? Well, if they are, there's a pretty good chance they're gonna accidentally shoot you in the fucking head for a critical hit causing an instant death. I certainly hope you don't walk into a corner either, because if a companion follows you into the corner, you might be trapped literally fucking forever, because they can block your path out extremely efficiently, staring you down while you claw at their fucking kneecaps, begging over and over for them to just move like 2 inches to the left. So much for being a fucking friend, huh? Man, I mean, since COVID, it's so much harder to make friends. It feels like everyone's just trying to lock you into a corner until you slowly dehydrate or starve to death, am I right? Well, the good news is in Fallout 2, it's incredibly easy to make friends. In fact, you can have like 4 companions at once, so you can become super likely to accidentally lock yourself into a corner and lose progress. Perfect. One other area where I felt a huge difference between the Bethesda games and Fallout 2 is the writing, and more so the general approach to quest design. The writing here is similar enough at first, but the deeper you get in, the more you notice how the free-flowing dialogue differs from Bethesda entries. In Fallout 2, the wrong choice in dialogue will outright lock you out of a major city in some cases. At one point, in a slummy building full of druggies, I encountered a random dude with an absurdly New York Italian accent who I proceeded to make fun of until he decided to attack me. He tried to stop punching me to death like a fucking gagoots, but the frickin' Wyo didn't realize that I got particularly high melee points, which means I can punch him to death before he can say Menegon. Once he got low on health, he tried running away, so I chased him around, finally catching him and smacking his shit in, ending his poor Italian life. I started grabbing around on his corpse, and I found multiple guns, which had me pretty confused as to why he was trying to punch me to death and didn't just fucking shoot my Menegon ass. I mean, Italians, am I right? Lots of small moments like these jump out and feel a lot more like they're based on your individual choices in the story, or just minor dialogue decisions than in later entries. And I know for a fact that if I played back through Fallout 2 again, I'd have a lot of new experiences based on my character and new dialogue choices. Almost everybody I've mentioned playing Game 2 asked if I became a porn star, which I didn't even know was an option. Apparently you can only unlock that route with certain stats, so I was locked into the low-paying but high reward job of being a fluffer instead. The quest design difference is super apparent through the main story itself as well. Again, you're tasked to find something that, without spoiling anything, you kinda just have to get lucky and stumble upon by talking to the right people and asking the right questions. There's never really a point where someone just tells you to go to a specific person to find the specific thing. Instead, they might just generally suggest you go to a certain city and fucking ask around, I guess. To further explain this point, I'm going to talk about a specific early major questline here. So if you want to skip that discussion, then check that timestamp that's flashing on the screen. It shouldn't be too hard to miss with the flashing lights, explosions, lasers, lightning, air horns, strobe lights, flying dogs, gay frogs, and big ol' slices of pizza. I love pizza! But anyways, skip to that timestamp if you don't want to have any major spoilers, alright? Because we're going into it. So basically, one of the first major cities you go to in Fallout 2 is Vault City, a city which has inside of it You guessed, a vault. It's one of the largest towns in the game, and the second town you generally visit. We're talking like first 5-ish hours of gameplay here. There's a problem though. Vault City is heavily guarded, and not just anyone can enter. In order to enter the city at all, you need to either be a citizen or have a day pass. There's a lot of ways to get a day pass. You can either steal one, show your sick vault suit off and get given one, or if you have your dialogue skill high enough, you can just talk your way in. Alternatively, a worker is willing to sell you false citizenship papers for the low, low price of 200 caps. You gotta be careful with fake papers. Badmouth the guards at a gate, and they either won't let you in or will just fucking shoot you. Fallout teaches us here the ever-important lesson that it's not only been fuck 12, but it will be fuck 12 until the year 2241. Play it cool enough with the guard, however, and you can finally enter the goddamn city. But you realize you need real citizenship to get into the actual vault here. Your fake-ass papers aren't gonna do. So you speak to the head of the town, and they basically tell you you can get real citizenship a couple ways. By taking a basically impossible test which requires insane skill points, or by helping them take care of a problem. See, there's a city of degenerate ghouls nearby, and they've been poisoning the town's water supply. So you gotta go fix that shit. Well, you make your way over there and find out they're actually kind of chill. Pretty funny and kind. They claim that they aren't intentionally poisoning any water, but that their power plant is missing a part that's causing the leak. Vault City, however, should have the part that's needed to fix the plant. Bingo! Problem solved. I've played Fallout games before. You know how the rest of this shit goes. You go back to the leader, explain the situation. She gives you the pump. Or, wait. She gets mad? What? I mean, all we need is this dumbass part and the issue is solved. Oh. Well, this is only a temporary fix, according to her. Taking out the entire town of ghouls, wiping them out one by one, is apparently the only solution she'll accept. And if you dare tell her that mass murder seems kind of cruel and unnecessary, you'll either get kicked out of the city for good or murdered. Alright, well, I don't know. What the fuck do I do now? My stats are way too low for that test, and I don't really want to go massacre all the chill-ass ghouls in that town. I certainly like them better than the Vault Town lady. Well, after reloading your save, you talk to everyone possible in town, and one of the last people you talk to ends up being a board member of the town. He's on board with fixing the plant, and he'll give you access to the parts himself, also offering to give you citizenship afterwards, bypassing that mean old leader. You can even go back to her after the fact of getting your citizenship papers and gloat in her fucking face that you got citizenship. I wanted to bring this particular moment up because I think it highlighted for me just how many solutions there are to any given quest here, and how some of the expected solutions unexpectedly could result in blocking you out of an area entirely. While the freedom of the quest design is invigorating, I do think sometimes it goes a bit too far and left me feeling kinda lost. Again, without spoiling anything, late in the game, you're told to go to a town without much directive. I went to said town and started a nearly impossible set of combat encounters that lasted me 3 hours before realizing the path I chose was like actually impossible. I learned that instead of just going to that place I was told to, I was supposed to talk to some very specific people in order to get some very important information about a new city that I hadn't been to at all. I had to give up a good 3 hours of gameplay and just reload my save. Stuff like that is pretty damn frustrating. There's something to be said about a balance maybe between quest design that squeezes your hand so goddamn hard that it ends up flinging you around like a fucking ragdoll, and quest design that shoves your hand away, pushing you down a 10-kilometer pit onto a set of spikes that then catch on fire and shortly after explode. Fallout 2 and 1 for that matter have one other specific way that they're very different from the Fallouts to come after, and that's how it handles the endings. I guess this is a minor spoiler, but Fallout 1 and 2 both have a timer of sorts, where if you take too long in the game world to finish the main objective, the game just ends. Boom. Everything lost. Granted, you get 12 years in game time, which is a lot, but still, if you're the type of gamer who tries to see and do everything offered up, you might hit that without realizing and be forced to undo some progress to finish the game out. In terms of the actual ending itself, this is handled quite differently too. Rather than being just a single ending cutscene that just wraps up the main ending of the game, Fallout 2 gives you an update on each and every town in the game, giving you a narrated conclusion to all of their stories, each town having a handful of possible conclusions. All your actions matter, and the game ends here. It's done. As a video game, and a Fallout game in general, Fallout 2 is pretty great. Boring and frustrating at times, But in my opinion, it's a worthwhile experience. There's clearly so much love and work that went into this game. One example being the talking heads that sometimes show in conversation, which are actually a mix of claymation and a bit of 3D animation. The result is a kind of creepy but incredibly memorable view of certain characters, and the fact that these are the only characters that have voiceover too makes it especially memorable. You often don't get that kind of fun experimentation these days in games. Fallout 2 seems to decidedly be one of the best Fallout games of all time, at least by longtime fans of this series, but the love pales in comparison to what's usually considered the best. I mean, we're talking about a game that's explicitly called one of the best RPGs of all time. And I'm sure at this point you figured out that when I say all this shit, I'm talking specifically about To see the core of what makes a great RPG, we don't have to look any further than Fallout New Vegas, a now legendary game which was built on top of a kind of busted Bethesda sandbox engine from Fallout 3, but suddenly took the ability to choose your role to a level that Bethesda hadn't done before. And that's because an entirely different studio made that game, and that studio is Obsidian Entertainment. Obsidian took Fallout back to its core compared to Fallout 3. In New Vegas, your choices mattered, and some of them would lock you out of a large chunk of content for the rest of the game, much like in Fallout 2. In Fallout 3, you can't kill any characters who have quests to give, and in New Vegas, you can kill just about anybody, regardless of if it breaks some quests or not. Your character choices also actually mattered a lot here. There are entire sections of missions that you'd only ever see if you decided to become a ravenous cannibal, embracing the chaos of the wasteland by nibbling on the genitals of your foes and sometimes friends. Getting one faction to like you would cause others to dislike you. Killing a member of a faction would get them to dislike you. I mean, look at a Legion member with side-eye and they'll start liking you less. New Vegas has 4 major endings, which is the same as Fallout 3, but unlike Fallout 3, afterwards there's end cards, which update you on how the world is doing based on your choices. Kind of similar to Fallout 2. Small things that happened in your gameplay can come back up at the end and remind you of how much of a horrible person you are. Yeah, we don't give a shit that it was only for a mission. You ate a fucking body, you immoral piece of shit. I mean, you really thought we'd forget about that? Becky can't bury her poor husband because you ate his fucking corpse. If you do a little math and include all the end cards here, there's literally... What? Is that like a gazillion? There's a gazillion different endings. I mean, that's a lot. This game is considered a classic for a reason. It takes the modern combat and exploration that Bethesda brought to Fallout 3 and mixed it with the classic RPG elements of the old Fallout games. The plot of New Vegas feels a lot like Fallout 2 as well. Here you start in a now famous opening where you witness what would be your last moments, shot and left in a shallow grave to die by some shady-looking individuals.
From where you're kneeling must seem like an 18-carat run of bad luck. Truth is, the game was rigged from the start.
Turns out, you didn't die, and this cute-ass old man patches you up and sets you out in the world. Here with a bit more of a path and direction, but still primarily having you bounce from city to city before you get even a bit of a clue as to what's going on and why someone would have wanted you dead. But for a moment, let's go back to Bethesda. Skyrim, their next game after Fallout 3, has a main quest that only has one single ending, and no end cards to be found. Once you, quote, finish the game, you just keep fucking going. You also don't have to choose a specific guild or faction in Skyrim, like in some Fallout entries. You can just try all of them out. I mean, in all fairness, some individual quest lines have varied endings. You also get to choose from several different classes, all of which have some minor changes to general NPC dialogue in the gameplay. The choices and role-playing really take the main form that they always do in Bethesda games. Your choices are namely in how you interact with the world and what order you end up tackling the content in. For example, in Skyrim, I famously got my stealth skill so high that I could steal the clothes off of people's backs. Once I realized this, I quickly proceeded to disrobe the entirety of Whiterun. For, for science. Look, I might have played the game like 10 years ago, but I was doing it for research for this video. I wanted to see if it was possible, right? You know, listen, you can't blame me for what my character wanted to do. I was just playing his role. Right? You should be mad at him. He's a fucking freak, right? He's a freaky exhibitionist freak, and I can't help that. What am I supposed to do? That's him. That's not me. It says nothing about me. It says everything about him. I mean, look, it's Todd's fault, really, when you think about it. This is all his fault. Why would he add this mechanic to a game, right? He's trying to tear his family apart, and we're letting him. Tommy, I swear to God, this has nothing to do with how I feel about your mother. God damn it, I love her so much. Don't make me choose between her and my fucking roleplay, you bastard. So, to break it down, New Vegas's role-playing breaks its way through every facet of the game. If you want to see everything there is here to offer, you'd have to play it multiple times. Bethesda's role-playing in comparison is quite different. The focus is more on environmental storytelling, and the RPG aspect mostly comes in with how you choose to approach the content rather than the impact your choices have on the content itself. Some of your actions may have minor consequences, like if you steal something and get caught, you'll gain a bounty, but all bounties could be paid off, and suddenly everybody's buddy-buddy again. Try to take my wife's clothes off in secret. Shame on you. But give me a couple of shiny big ones and I think we could put this beef to rest. Bethesda wants to create a limitless playthrough where everything can be experienced easily and conveniently. New Vegas, on the other hand, has an actual fucking ending point. A point where the credits roll and the movie ends. Nice, you did it. Now you can turn off the fucking game. Probably my favorite system from New Vegas that I'm pretty mad they removed in later entries is the reputation system. It gives you a gauge on how each faction around town is feeling about you. Let's look specifically to start at the Powder Gangers. Lore-wise, these guys are escape prisoners who love using dynamite to solve problems. In today's age, they'd all live in a content house together, blowing up cars and shit, but in the Fallout world, they're just living off the roads, trying to scrape by. Even deeper, lore-wise though, these prisoners were previously held by the NCR, or New California Republic, one of the predominant peacekeeping forces of southwestern America in the post-apocalypse. The NCR at some point had a jail full of convicts who they were using to help maintain railroads and some 13th Amendment shit. But at some point, the NCR had to thin their numbers of guards in the area as they had to shift their focus to the Legion, who just started threatening their territory. Less guards made a pretty perfect opportunity for these convicts to break out and cause chaos once again. Thus, the Powder Gangers were born. These guys are strewn all about the wasteland. You encounter them really early on, but at first, they won't hurt you. If you interact with them, they might not talk back so nice, but they won't lift a finger against you. They won't lift a finger, that is, until you start doing some quests for their hated NCR, or if you kill some of them, whatever your reasons may be for doing so, a side quest which tasks you with it, or if you just felt a strike of sociopathic rage and just needed to fucking shoot someone. If you kill one of them or work for their enemies, you lose reputation with them. And once your reputation for them gets low enough, it's just fucking on sight. If these dudes catch you any time of day, they immediately start shooting. So yeah, your actions have consequences. Sure, you can shoot almost anybody, but all their gang buddies will start to fucking shoot you back. For some reason, this system, along with the karma system for Fallout 3, which judges all of your actions through the game as good or bad, were just gutted in future entries. See, the factions here are a massive part of the game, as they are in any Fallout game, but here it's even more integral to the story itself. You see, you got the Brotherhood of Steel, the NCR, again, New California Republic. You got Caesar's Legion, the Powder Gangers, the Boomers, who are basically a gooder version of the Powder Gangers. You got the Great Khans, the Kings, the Fiends. There's even more inside of Vegas proper too. The main 4 casinos all being represented by different groups. You got the White Gloves, the Omertas, the Chairman, and the mysterious Mr. House, who rules over the entire surrounding Vegas area. There's a lot of factions, and each and every one has their own sliding scale on how they feel about you at any given moment. It adds a lot more personality to the experience, that each guy you're gunning down has some lore behind them. In later Fallout games, pretty much any random enemy is simply a raider. But here, there's a little more meaning behind every battle above it just being some fucking lunatic. It might be worth succinctly explaining some of the main factions here, as some of them do come up in other entries. The NCR, which I mentioned earlier, is a core of the franchise, their flag with a double-headed bear being, well, almost as recognizable as the Brotherhood of Steel logo and suit. The NCR showed up at some point in the post-apocalypse, meant to be somewhat of a replacement for the US government, a law-enforcing entity which wanted to bring civil rule back to the world, creating their own system of fiat currency in the form of NCR bills, although their value isn't very high in comparison to the world standard bottle caps. The NCR namely rules over California, or as it is in the Apocalypse, New California. So they mostly show up in Fallout 2 and New Vegas, only mentioned in some of the other entries that don't take place in the area. The one faction that's in every single Fallout game and even got their own fucking entry is the Brotherhood of Steel. The Brotherhood of Steel are essentially an authoritarian military organization seeking to control any kind of potentially dangerous technology that could be used to harm humanity. While their focus remains mostly the same through all the Fallout entries, their modes of operation change quite a bit. In the earlier Fallouts and here in New Vegas, they're generally very well hidden, a group operating from the shadows that people don't really know much about. But in later entries, they just fuck shit up in public and talk with pretty much anyone. They also develop varying focuses of who and what they're trying to keep in check, and in some entries are fairly tied in with the core story at hand. Here, in New Vegas, they're more or less optional side content. The main struggle here is between Caesar's Legion and the NCR. The Legion being a totalitarian, slaving society, led by a brutal leader with a massive following who all serve and fear him. The Legion uses a twisted framework inspired by ancient Roman history, and they seek to take over the wasteland completely, squashing anyone along their path. And yeah, while the core of the story here has to do with the territorial conflict between the NCR and the Legion, a main branch of the main plot has a great way of asking you to check in with all the other surrounding factions, and asks you what you think of them. Basically, Obsidian found a way to do what Bethesda strives for, having you do all the side content on your playthrough, but they were able to build it directly into the story quite cleverly. The DLCs add even more factions to the mix, and give more background and complications to both the Legion and the NCR, all of the content tying into itself to a large knot that easily feels like the most fleshed out 3D world in the series. It's worth noting too that the dialogue in the DLCs are some of the most interesting and truly funny in the entire franchise. If you're someone who watched the show and just enjoys the tone and world, there's no better place to go than here.
I was at the top of my high school class in American high school. I knew facts, I knew figures, I knew data.
Probably the biggest thing that Fallout 3 and New Vegas in turn added to Fallout is the allure of exploring and the potential to come across small content, especially minor quests that aren't marked, little doodads to play with, audio logs to listen to and find out some localized lore, or even something as simple as a well thought out placement of a corpse, hinting at a couple who was locked into embrace as the bombs dropped. All of these subtle moments feel incredibly tied to your experience. Them being unmarked makes it feel fresh, like you're truly one of the first people to stumble upon this. Fallout New Vegas might have a little less of this than 3 given the overall scope of the game, but that's the balancing act that they chose. Time is money, and 18 months certainly ain't that much time, meaning that if Obsidian wanted to add a bunch of fancy new systems that made the world more reactive, they might not have the time to add as much detail to the wasteland. There are actually some gamers out there who prefer 3 to New Vegas, and my guess is it would be for this exact reason. You see, Bethesda's gameplay over time has shifted. They see that while a particularly large and vocal group of gamers might play their games for a complex story and interesting moral dilemmas like Fallout 1 and 2 so wonderfully delved into, an even larger number of more casual gamers played these games to get lost in the world. These gamers are more interested in having fun wiping out enemies and exploring new locations, and might be more or less skipping through the dialogue between the fun bits of gameplay. Skyrim is so beloved, I think for this reason. There's still some interesting and well-written quests if you know where to look, but most people probably just focus their time on going into every cave they can and wiping out anything in existence. Bethesda recognizes this. They hear the screams of rage about how Oblivion was better, but the numbers show them that Skyrim is much more marketable. New Vegas may have sold more copies than 3, but clearly Bethesda wanted to try and get more gamers to the Fallout world, to turn the massive success that was Skyrim into a big wave of hype for a series that some of the more casual gamers might not know yet. The focus on moment-to-moment gameplay over quality dialogue becomes even more apparent once gamers got their oily ass fingers all the fuck over. I played the shit out of Fallout 4. I mean, truly, I abused the fuck out of my old ass PS4, making that shit sound like a goddamn nuclear reactor. I truly 100%ed the game. I'm talking I explored every single corner of the map. This is the first Bethesda game that really got me in that deep. I put time into Skyrim, but skipped the main quest. New Vegas I played all the way through, but didn't get around to the DLCs and left a lot of side quests undone. For Fallout 4, I was fucking Googling lists of every side quest in the game to make sure I had finished each and every one. And I had a fucking great ass time doing it too. To give a brief and spoiler-free plot overview, you start in the year 2077, on D-Day itself. This is a pretty unique opening for Fallout, the first time in the series where you actually get to start before the war begins. You're a mom or dad looking after your little baby Sean, your sweet, wonderful baby little boy with the most squeezable cheeks in the whole wide world. Oogie boogie little baby boy. And then boom, the bombs drop. The world is demolished and you get locked into a fallout shelter where you are cryogenically frozen. In this state, you wake up just enough at some point to see your significant other that you've only known for like 3 fucking minutes, shot in the fucking head, and your baby, your little baby, stolen, taken from you. What the fuck? Who would do such a thing? You awake 210 years after the initial war in the year 2287, 46 years after the events of Fallout 2 in the canon, and now you must find your boisterous, jubilant baby boy, killing like 1 million fucking people along your path to save your one and only Shawnee boy. Anyways, it's an engaging intro, probably my favorite of the series. To do a light story summary, the game has a lot to do with synths, of which there are few in Fallout 3, but 4 is chock full of them and mostly revolves around them. Synths are synthetic humans, androids for the layman. You end up in a fight between different groups, some advocating for and against synths, and the plot builds in a way that serves to reframe your thoughts of how right or wrong the group behind the creations of the synths is, the Institute. Will you find your boy? Is the Institute good? Or is the Institute bad? Will you fuck the shit out of Nick Valentine's tight little robotic ass? Only one way to find out, baby. Load that PS4 up and let the dust from the internal fans fill your lungs with asbestos and millions of dead skin cells, melting your mind into a fugue state filled with loose screws and minor gun modifications. Right on the wild side, brother. Imagine, just for the sake of argument, that you're in a big-ass empty room with me. A really dingy one, you know, it's all concrete walls and shit. Some kind of abandoned basement. You're far from me. You're all the way on the other side of the room, curled up in fetal position, squirming, cold, naked. I'm pissing. Pissing so goddamn much and with so much exertion that my face turns red as my stream gets closer and closer to you. You hear the trickle ebb and flow, getting closer and then further as I keep trying to push it further towards you. And I'm aiming right at you too, at your face and your asshole, finally pushing hard enough and starting to cake your bare skin in my oddly viscous piss stream. I'm eating asparagus as I do it too. Raw. The crunch of it stings your ears. The smell of vinegar and farts filling your lungs as you begin to lose feeling in all of your body, wondering if you'll be able to make it out of here alive. Will someone come to save you? Or am I your only hope? Yeah, so that's basically how the dialogue feels in Fallout 4. The game somewhat makes up for this by throwing in a lot of new fun systems to toy with. Gun and armor modding. And a brand new toy that you can't quite play with because it's clipping into the fucking wall in the form of base building, adding a new facet to the game which involves you stripping the Forgotten Wasteland of all the useless rubble left behind by the bomb, finally giving us the rat role-playing experience we've been asking for. You can churn your junk and somehow make it into a fucking house, adding a shiny new layer of still kind of withered looking shit, but hey, it's your withered looking shit. And Nuka-Cola shit. Nuka-Cola, I want to take a sip so fucking bad. You can recruit people to your towns, and you have to make sure that they have the right amount of food and water and bedding. You can build defenses for your community, and you kind of need to, because they get invaded, and you are the god to these people. They're judge, juror, and executioner. Finally, you have become the Rat King. Preston Garvey is nothing but a gear in your machine, and you can oil him up as much as you want.
I'll see you back at home. Be careful, babe.
I mean, look, these systems of crafting and building aren't perfect, but they're pretty dang fun and can be stretched fairly far in the base game, let alone with modding. But also, it's a Bethesda game still, so if you're like me, you'll just fucking ignore all that shit. Who the fuck cares about armor and gun modding when you can just shoot every moving creature in a 10-mile radius in its fucking head until it drops a cool new gun that you can use to shoot even more creatures? If in Fallout 2, you're evenly matched with your enemies, having the same amount of health and armor, in Fallout 4, you are literally a fucking god, ripping apart anything in front of you in a few seconds flat. You can play this game in a lot of different ways, and the perk system here is working pretty well and requires you to put points in any given ability that you want to get better at. This means you're slowly building your ideal playstyle. You a big crafting nerd? Well, you'll probably be investing there. You want to just blow shit up? Well, you're probably going to invest in explosive skills. In concept, this adds replayability, where you're making decisions about your playstyle, but in reality, these perks help, but only really change things so much. And once you get to a high enough level, you're able to just invest a little bit into everything, so you're never really locked out of any given playstyle. You could quite easily transition from a melee-only playthrough to a pistol-focused build, honestly, even without the perks to boost these specific weapons. Sticking with the older Fallouts, there are a number of companions you can pair up with, from Nick Valentine, the synth detective, to Piper, the determined journalist, and Strong, the super mutant hailing from the Institute, who wants to, drink your milk.
Strong will find milk. Strong will drink milk.
Not only can you pair up with these folks, but you can romance them too. And to speak for all Bethesda fans, finally Todd allowed us to roleplay as a rat, fucking the shit out of some super mutant bussy, as we've always dreamed of. The game certainly has a lot of glitches and ways to be broken, but it feels like it's kind of meant to be broken, like you're meant to find rare guns that are stupidly overpowered. See, Fallout 4 marks the beginning of a new gameplay system for Bethesda, which is dynamic loot. Basically, any gun or piece of armor you find has certain modifiers on it, most of which make the gun or armor stronger, but there's a lot of smaller perks like pocketed armor, which gives you extra carrying capacity, or maybe different clips for your guns, some allowing you to reload faster, some giving the clip more ammo at the sacrifice of reloading taking longer, or making your gun heavier. While earlier on you find a lot of basic weapons with no modifiers, as the game goes on, these become pretty much useless. You have to rely on guns and armor with good modifiers. Later in the game, most enemies are spawned in with modified weapons, meaning you can peruse through every single gun that somebody drops and look at the perks before you decide to take it. And special enemies like bosses typically drop customly modified guns that are usually meant to match their character somewhat. Modding fits in perfectly here, like that one missing puzzle piece that somehow got underneath the fucking rug. If you don't want to rely on a random good gun dropping, you can put perks into getting better gun crafting options, eventually meaning you can turn any old gun into a god-tier murder weapon, assuming you have the necessary crafting components. And let's say you're short on one crafting component, maybe screws. Here, as I always fucking seem to be, well, in this game you can target screws, meaning that any loose piece of junk strewn about the wasteland with screws in it will have a little magnifying glass on it, making your search just a little bit easier. All of this works pretty well, kinda. I mean, the issue I have with this is that the difficulty of the game is so heavily skewed on you having rare gun mods that it makes gun crafting feel more or less necessary. If you think of Skyrim, there was crafting, and there were so many different ways to approach gameplay, be it your dragon shouts, magic spells, focusing on bows, focusing on melee. In Fallout, the gameplay feels a bit more streamlined. Melee is kind of an option, but ultimately with a much more lackluster stealth system, going in guns blazing is kind of always your best option. And unlike in Skyrim, the choice of going into modding feels much more like an illusion. Playing the game a second time, it feels incredibly apparent that Bethesda wants you to interact with the crafting system, which honestly makes it kind of confusing why the best parts of it are locked behind a wall of perk points that I really would just rather use differently. What? Once you get to the late game, your OP guns just seem to stick. Every once in a while, you may find a cool new modded weapon, but ultimately, when shit gets heavy, you know you have to pull out whatever your old reliable is to get the job done. And this leads to a late game difficulty that feels pretty grindy and not very rewarding. Early in the game, when you're constantly forced to swap between different guns as you run out of ammo, shit feels tense as hell. The gameplay feels amazing and genuinely scary at times, as each encounter can really feel like it's based on your skill and how prepared you were for the encounter. Late game, the hard work pays off, but too quickly and for too long, I think. Think about roguelike games here, for example. A roguelike game functions very similarly. There's a massive initial wave of difficulty, but the more you unlock, the easier the game gets, not just because of your skill increasing, but because of the fancy new perks and weapons you got. Gameplay becomes a lot more streamlined, but in a roguelike setting where beating the game may only take an hour or two, that feels really rewarding and fun. In Fallout, however, it feels like you hit that point way too soon, when there's still dozens of hours of gameplay left, so what initially feels well-deserved and worked for ends up making the experience just feel kind of boring and dull. Overall, despite my issues though, the moment-to-moment gameplay here is the most fun it's been in any of the other Fallout games, so that's a pretty big dub in my book. But Probably the biggest L the game takes in return, as I mentioned earlier, is in the dialogue. I mean, don't get me wrong. The voiceover here is in some spots truly the best Bethesda can offer, particularly in the synth detective Nick Valentine. He's written in a slightly corny way, a caricature of like a comic book 1950s detective, but given how great the voice work is and the plot significance of having a robo boy to go on adventures with and fondle your way through the world with, any corniness is forgiven, and instead, he becomes one of the best parts of the game. When I think back on Fallout 4 and my time with it, Nick Valentine, to me, truly is the face of the game. But despite some good writing here and there, overall the dialogue is at best predictable and at worst pretty much skippable. Dialogue options don't fall into a list of choices like previous Fallout games, no. In Fallout 4, instead you have 4 neat little dialogue options packaged to you with a little bow on top. These 4 neat options can be broken down across the board as yes in a different way, tell me more, or no. And here's a picture of what that dialogue tree looks like. I'm sorry, the footage that I'm showing here is modded. Again, I was playing the game for the second time and I wanted to see what the mods were like, so don't expect that my footage is gonna be exactly like the real game experience. Something's gonna be different. This is one of them. Obviously, people modded it because it's pretty fucking bad, but here's pictures so you gotta see what it is. I'm sorry about that. So don't go into the game expecting what I'm showing right now. Okay, please don't do it, okay? Expect this, not what I was showing earlier. Okay, thank you, bye. Dialogue just doesn't feel natural when it's so clearly turned into a formula, and though it's still pretty damn formulaic in other Bethesda entries, this system feels particularly stale and honestly kind of bold for Bethesda to show their cards so blatantly in that they don't view dialogue as conversation, but instead as a system to deliver information to the player. I mean, quite literally, that's what all dialogue in gaming really is, but the trick of good dialogue is to cover up that intent with writing that's either clever enough or realistic enough to make the player forget about the underlying system and instead just feel enveloped by the world and characters around them, the dialogue serving as a way for them to let out their character's personality. The dialogue in general is never like offensively bad or anything, but also it's never that interesting, which means you'll most likely either find yourself skipping some of the dialogue or just bored out of your fucking mind. When it comes to dialogue generally, it feels like there's a pretty clear line through all these games that has them putting emphasis on quantity over quality, with each new game being touted as having so many thousand more dialogue options than the last. It's just kind of a meme at this point. It would be hard to believe that that's really selling anyone on anything. Dialogue aside, Bethesda is unbelievably good at world building and giving a place a feeling. This, again, is one thing that New Vegas does lack in comparison to all of its advantages to the Bethesda RPG. The land can feel pretty barren and dead. Admittedly, this does kind of fit the Vegas desert feeling, and it's arguably closer to what Fallout 1 and 2 achieved. The end result is a game that feels Bethesda, but doesn't really stick Bethesda. Sticky Bethesda goo. What I mean by that, I think, is that in New Vegas, I remember the plot, the decisions, the characters, the superb dialogue and ethical quandaries. For Fallout 4, I remember the world, the random encounters, the looting and upgrading. Sure, I remember the vibe of Nick Valentine in the overall story, but the things that make me want to play Fallout 4 again is the exploration itself, and to fuck around more with the new systems that got introduced. And in terms of exploration in a large map, it really does not get much better than Fallout 4. There are so many open world games based around real life cities that are fun to explore and even more fascinating if you know the geography of the real land it's based on. You could look at Watch Dogs and this is Chicago? What the fuck were they smoking on? GTA and their scaled down interpretations of LA and Miami. But I really think the most impressive version of any open world real city equivalent I've played is Fallout 4's Boston. I visited Boston for the first time last year, years after beating Fallout 4, and it was kind of insane to feel deja vu, seeing exact buildings from the game and walking exact paths that I remembered getting my legs shot off on. Not just for a block or two, but what felt like miles. The map in Fallout 4 feels daunting and massive, and even though it's technically similar in size to that of New Vegas or 3, the amount of locations that are fully explorable feel way larger than its predecessors. The downtown area in particular is incredibly impressive. While many streets are blocked off and segmented by raider groups or super mutants, the landmarks are all there. Having to fight your way through the streets of Boston feels great, and the city scale is unparalleled for Bethesda in general. I mean, the real experience of Boston was almost exactly the same as the experience in Fallout 4, but like imagine instead of ghouls and super mutants, you have weird generational racists that purely sustain their life force from Dunkin' Donut sprinkles, and millennials that unironically wear merch from Barstool Sports. Fallout 4 is pretty great in terms of tone and aesthetic. It's much more colorful and flora-ridden than Fallouts of the past, which my theory is we could maybe partially thank Last of Us for. The addition of greenery is great and fits the more coastal vibe compared to New Vegas. Fallout 4 also starts a new trend of Bethesda turning Fallout from its roots of nihilism and ethos towards a positive and eerily familiar message of putting America back together. Making it, taking it, no. What if we made America good? No. I don't know. See, it was never really about the thousands of people you slaughter and the fatalistic society the bomb created. It was always about the friends we made along the way. As we discussed earlier when we were talking Fallout 2, the original point of Fallout was to parodize the bomb fears of 1950s America, juxtaposing it with the bright pastel and neon advertisements and the shiny robot butlers to take care of your every need. Fallout 4, kind of lost the plot here a bit. The juxtaposition is still there whether Todd wants it to be because it's built so strongly into the design of the world itself, but with each optimistic-ass character and albeit gorgeously rendered forest, the original intent and message of Fallout becomes muddled and twisted into something new. Not something bad per se, but something that feels a lot more derivative in my opinion. This message continues on after Fallout 4, but it definitely starts here. If the goal here is to rebuild America, metaphorically and in your case, pretty fucking literally as you're masterminding new communities and leading a new, better civilization, Boston is a pretty perfect location, just as DC was to Fallout 3. An incredibly historic city connected foundationally to the formation of the old America that Fallout is both emulating and twisting beyond recognition. It's all the more frustrating then that racism as a topic is danced around constantly but never touched upon, with one of the factions literally being an underground railroad that advocates for synths. Yet, racism is never really talked about directly in a game with an underground fucking railroad. In today's culture where nostalgia has become a currency, the easiest way to sell a movie ticket or even a fucking presidency, Fallout as an IP is ripe for the picking by Bethesda, a company who can craft huge worlds to explore and can stick to a vibe perfectly, and as they know, can sell a shit ton of merch or microtransactions in the process of doing so. Hey, have you ever heard of Nuka-Cola? Oh, yeah, I know you have. And have you ever thought about drinking Windex? Oh man, I know you've thought about that shit. All right, don't even try and play with me. Just imagine, after a long day of hard physical labor, coming home, cracking open one of those big blue boys, slurping it down. Oh my God, dude. I just know that shit tastes like blue raspberry. I mean, it has to. It has to taste like blue raspberry. Oh my God, dude, you want to buy Nuka-Cola Quantum. You want to. Oh man, it's just like that Windex, isn't it? Oh, you want a Pip-Boy too? Yeah. Yeah, I know you do. You want to eat radroach meat? Yeah. Yeah, you want to eat the meat of a radroach. I know it. But you want that fucking Nuka-Cola. Oh my God, you want to drink that Nuka-Cola. And you'll pay $1. You will. You'll pay $1, maybe $5 of real world money to get that Nuka-Cola fridge in your house. Virtual or not, it hits the same. I know you will. I know you. I know you may be better than you even know yourself. So just go ahead, drink that Windex. Why not? Bethesda's game worlds have always been full of a lot of lootable objects, but in the past, a lot without much of a purpose. Here though, you can just fucking take anything that isn't stapled down, lining your pockets full of typewriters, fans, mugs, gas canisters, and turn them into something new, like a muzzle for your gun or an added layer of protection on your armor. There's so many mods that you can put on your weapons and armor, and there's so many things that you can craft, especially when you factor in all the DLCs, which tend to add a lot of new content to the base building aspect, making looting an even bigger component of the game than in the past. That much looting might sound boring, but once that inner rat gets moving, you won't be able to stop until you've chewed straight through your keyboard wire. I went through 3. I don't want to get too far into discussing modding because I think these games should be discussed on the state of purchase for any gamer on any platform, but as you can imagine, modders have found a shit ton of ways to expand upon these crafting systems, taking the mechanics to the next level. In fact, for this video, I repurchased Fallout 4 and downloaded a modding pack with over 200 mods. I started a new save, and when I learned my pack included some, questionable mods, my character was born. Everyone's favorite mommy, Big Bertha. This was my first time diving deep into modding aside from messing with some silly workshop mods in Skyrim, and the experience was amazing. Honestly, it had been so long since I played Fallout 4 that it was hard to tell what was new and what wasn't sometimes. If the world was more open than I had remembered, or if I had just forgotten some things in the almost decade that's passed since I first played Fallout 4. I can totally see how people could put thousands of hours into these games with modding as an option. The amount of new content and fixes is kind of overwhelming, and even though Fallout 4 came out, again, almost a fucking decade ago, there's still people uploading new mods and finding new ways to change the game today. But I didn't start replaying Fallout 4 for the mods. I didn't replay it for Fallout 4 actually really at all. I didn't really want to talk about Fallout 4 that much. I don't even like talking, so I'm gonna stop for the rest of this video. All right, fine, that was a dumb bit. Look, I didn't play Fallout 4 for Fallout 4. I played it for its best DLC, Far Harbor. Far Harbor is a DLC which puts you into Bar Harbor, Maine, a small town skirting the side of Acadia National Park. You get it? Far Harbor, Bar Harbor, Far, Bar, Far Bar, Bar, Far. Might be a little too high level of a connection for some of y'all, but shout out to my fellow Rick and Morty enjoyers out there. Now, why in the friggin' heckers would I replay an entire game just to play a single DLC, you might ask? Because this DLC fucking fucks so hard. Or at least from what I remembered, it did. In my mind, Far Harbor did everything right in terms of story and outcomes that the main missions lacked, and I decided to go find out if I remembered correctly. Far Harbor introduces a brand new island to explore, a surprisingly large island at that, with a bunch of new shit to do, and also introduces new enemy types to the Wasteland, which is pretty dope. It definitely sets itself out as the largest DLC for Fallout 4, as the others are, like I said earlier, mostly expansions to the settlements. Now look, I'm gonna start by giving a big fat ol' spoiler warning for this DLC. If you haven't played it and might in the future, then skip to the time code on the screen, all right? I'm warning you, I'm only gonna say this one time. I'm waiting. You pinching one off? You smacking your shit crazy style? Well, get back to your fucking phone and click the timestamp on the screen. This is your last fucking warning. Okay, well now that those dumbass fucking idiot losers are gone, let's get cracking and back to snacking. Far Harbor initiates by giving you a mission, a task, if you will, where you're putting on your detective hat to find the Econo family's missing daughter. They keep crying to you, oh, poor me, my daughter left, and we don't know where she is, and blah, blah, blah. I mean, look, Econos, if that's even your fucking name, right, we all have problems. Okay? I mean, how the hell did these two not already figure this shit out? You literally just listen to a few audio logs that are left around their property and find out that she's gone away to a synth community near Bar Harbor, thinking that she, in fact, is a synth herself. Interesting enough of a start. Well, the parents offer you a shitty little boat and off you go through a treacherous journey, aka a 1-minute loading screen, after which you land on the island. You're quickly greeted and then tasked with helping the town to defend itself, quickly learning that the island is covered in a thick layer of fog, Silent Hill style, which serves as cover for tons of nasty beasts. The actual town of Bar Harbor using special lamps to keep the fog out of the community. You find out pretty quickly that the island is inhabited by 3 main factions. The synth community in Acadia, led by a peace-seeking synth named Dima. You get the Children of Adam, a familiar community not only to Fallout 4, but Fallout in general. A cult community who worships radiation, and in this case, worships the dangerous fog itself and wishes to spread it further across the land. And then you got the human community we already know and love, Bar Harbor, a group of hardworking, good old Americans trying to make it in this cold, hard, apocalyptic world. The factions, and specifically the tensions between them, are the focus here, similar to most Fallout main game plots. Bar Harbor thinks the Children of Adam are making the fog worse, and are skeptical of the synth at Acadia. The Children of Adam have a relatively new leader who is war-hungry and wants to have the island to himself, who hopes to wipe Acadia and Bar Harbor off the map completely. And Acadia wants to keep peace, simply hoping to both keep a home for the synths as well as a home for the other factions. But though everything seems beautiful and wonderful on the outside, you learn that the synth community has some hidden secrets that you'll be on a quest to flesh out. Dima, again, the synth leader, is both an endearing and kind, as well as unbelievably off-putting leader. I mean, it literally feels like you're talking to a mix of HAL 9000 and Hannibal Lecter at times. Dima is a synth who seems to be trying to convince random humans that they're actually also synths. Why would anybody ever believe that, you might ask? Well, it requires a little bit of further minor spoilers about Fallout 4's story, which is that the Institute, again, they are the group that created synths, is at times killing random people and replacing them with synths. In many cases, the synths are completely unaware that they were humans first. Bar Harbor asks a pretty interesting question, which is, how would people react if they knew that this was going on? How many people who may already be looking for fringe groups might feel like all their questions were answered by finding out that they aren't just unlike the people around them, but aren't even people at all? If you ask me, this is sci-fi gold. Using a moral dilemma like this to comment on the culture at large, it's a story that has the fixtures like all classic sci-fi does. Although, even though Bethesda asks some interesting questions, a lot of the most juicy shit gets left unsaid. The first time you meet Dima, he actually has the fucking audacity to ask you if you're a synth. And not like you, the dude controlling the character, but you, your character, in my case, Big Bertha. He asks you what your earliest memory is. Well, in your character's case, this would be the moment before the bombs dropped, holding your baby boy, Sean. But how is that your first memory? I mean, you have a kid. Don't you remember them being born? You don't remember anything about your job before, about your family outside of your spouse and son? This is a pretty fucking interesting plot point, using the beginning of the game against the player in the moment, allowing them to question their own character's humanity. If the game was written to take things even further, a great answer for the character would be that maybe they have PTSD from the literal entire world being fucking destroyed. That maybe Dima is a freak who's taking advantage of people with mental illness, trying to manipulate them into joining his community and leaving humanity behind. Instead, they mention the interesting concept and then move on pretty fucking swiftly. A whole new layer to this shit comes about if Nick Valentine, the synth detective, is your active companion here, as Dima claims to be, and eventually proves to be, Nick's brother. Or as close to a brother as possible, being a revision of Nick's personality. Nick is just as good here as he was in the main game, adding additional context to the synth plot and a layer of his wit and charm across the board.
Sure.
The main plot of the DLC has you tracking down some lost memories of Dima. Old memories which he put into storage, more or less, but now he wants to find out what's in there. With conflict on the island reaching high, he's hoping there's something in there that could help calm the tension a bit. Once you find these memories, the rest of the quest is tracking down proof to bring to Dima, and then making some decisions about how Dima should deal with the old memories and what the outcome for the island at large should be. Essentially, the plot is like spending a summer with your grandmother who has Alzheimer's and digging through old photos and scrapbooks. You find out that Mima is a bona fide war criminal. Ouch. Those double spiced Christmas cookies are not gonna taste the same this year. One of the old memories that you're tasked with reviving reveals that Dima has knowledge of a code to bomb the shit out of the abandoned submarine that the children of Adam are stationed within. Another one is confirmation on Nick's brotherhood to Dima, and one very shocking discovery is that years ago, Dima murdered the leader of Bar Harbor and replaced her with a synth to ensure that the town would be an ally to his community. Dima then wiped this from his and the new synth's memory, so everyone involved would become unaware of his manipulation.
I did it. I killed a woman from Far Harbor and replaced her. I stripped a synth's identity from her and made her an agent.
Yikes. I mean, the dude likes to act like Mahatma Gandhi, but murdering a random person and putting a fake in their place? Well, in the words of the artist formerly known as Kanye West, that ain't very Christ-like. I mean, I think Gandhi slept with like 15-year-old girls or something, so not that he's that Christ-like either. All of this information concludes with a series of choices. In fact, there are 8 different possible endings to the main quest here. Kinda nuts when all the modern Fallouts have like 2 endings and they're so unbelievably stereotypically good or evil endings that it's just a goddamn no-brainer. Do I want to murder an entire town? Or conversely, not murder an entire town? What a truly difficult dilemma to solve. You know, I might have to just sleep on that one a bit. Here, in this little old DLC, I actually struggled to make a decision, as there isn't really a perfect choice, but instead you're stuck picking the better of evils. You can choose to go to Bar Harbor yourself and reveal to them that they have a synth in their presence, and they'll not only kill Dima, but they'll also take out all of Acadia, killing all of the innocent synths, or potentially normal people who just think that they're synths. You can also choose to side with the children of Adam if you're like, fucking suck. You could go the opposite route and choose to nuke the children of Adam. You can kill Dima. You can wipe out Acadia. Or if you choose like me, you can side with Dima for an alternate method where you replace the leader of the children of Adam with a synth to instill peace and bring down their murderous rage. It's a route which keeps peace on the island, leading potentially to the least deaths, but then again, in this case, you're also siding with the freaky fucking cyborg who's using people's mental issues for his own personal gain. And the idea of him pulling the strings through every faction of the island, well, doesn't really feel great, does it? Again, in the face of lesser evils, I chose this route, and it turns out you can trick Dima a little bit on this path, and instead of killing the leader of the Children of Adam, you can rat out Dima and reveal the whole plan to him instead, which results in the cult leader talking with Dima instead and solving it peacefully without needing to murder or deceive anyone. Even without killing the Children of Adam leader, this decision still doesn't feel like an entire win. I wish there was an option to just, like, kill Dima and let one of the other synths rise to power, one that's less spooky and shit and hasn't committed atrocities in the name of peace. But not having a perfect ending is part of what makes this work so well, I think. There are undoubtedly some better endings than others here, but I think there would be some debate over which ending here is the true good ending, and that's what makes this DLC so interesting. Far Harbor does a great job of bringing the moral complexity of Fallout 2 into the modern Fallouts. There's a reason it's so beloved. While the gameplay is the same and the plotline is kind of simple, the array of choices at the end is pretty complex. There's a lot more to Far Harbor than just this though. The island is a ton of fun to explore. The addition of the new enemies and the fog into the already gorgeous weather conditions in the base game make for a really immersive world to travel through. The main story isn't the only thing going on this island too. There's a lot to explore and see, but anyways, that's Far Harbor mostly wrapped up. It was a little less magical than I remembered, but I did very much enjoy my time with it, and the ending in particular did remind me of why I thought back on it so fondly. And on the whole, really, I'm glad I revisited Fallout 4. Critically, Fallout 4 did fairly well, but look no further than the Metacritic to see just how big of a discrepancy there is between fans and critics. Over time, this game has gained a lot more love, and the discussion has gotten way more positive. But it's hard to imagine that it could ever be considered a solid classic like Skyrim or Fallout New Vegas. So, that's it. I mean, that's the last Fallout game that we had, and while we look forward to the TV show and seeing what was that? Huh? There's another what? I don't know, wait. There's another Fallout game? No, I don't think so. I think I would know about that. Oh, wait. Are you talking about? Fallout 76 didn't just get Bethesda hate. The same kinds of moans and groans and complaints of bugs you might expect, no. Fallout 76 got a special kind of hate, reserved for the legendary pre-order busts like No Man's Sky, Cyberpunk 2077, Mass Effect Andromeda, and many more targets of pure streams of gamer rage. The Todd Howard memes went from a few forum shitposts to precision airstrikes, predator missiles, stealth bombers, tactical nukes unleashed, the world on the brink of total world war due to the unfathomable levels of gamer rage. I hope this man has some extra protection on him when he leaves the house, because based on some of the conversations you'll find online, you'd think Bethesda has missiles constantly being launched at their fucking office windows. Todd specifically caught a lot of flack, even though he seemingly didn't have a ton of oversight on this game in particular, or at least not as much as the other entries we're talking about today. The game was, allegedly, as I never played it, a big ol' sloppy mess pile of microtransaction garbage DLC. This was one of the first games from Bethesda to truly get panned not just by fans, but critics this time around aimed their rifles and unloaded their clips, saving all of their choice words for the studio for the dumpster fire that was the release of this game. Like most people, I think, I barely even knew what Fallout 76 was, aside from it being a broken cash grab. I kind of assumed it was some dumbass PvP kind of experience, divorced from everything that made Fallout 4, and Fallout in general for that matter, good, and just a desperate attempt to get more time and money from gamers. And that might have been true, but I lied when I said I never played it, because I finally tried it recently, and I was wrong on just about everything I thought that this game was. Fallout 76 basically takes everything from Fallout 4, new mechanics like crafting especially, and makes them, and I can't believe I'm saying this, better. This game, now, at least, is pretty fucking fun. I picked it up on a whim for like $6 during the winter sale, mostly for this video, but partly out of interest, as over the years I've seen some Steam friends rack up hundreds of hours in this game. I mean, it has to be at least somewhat interesting for someone to play it that much, right? Despite a slightly rocky first few hours where my initial thoughts felt seemingly confirmed, the game pretty quickly took off for me in a way I never expected it to. Fallout 76 actually works surprisingly well. It may be a multiplayer, always online game, but for all intents and purposes, all 65 of my hours spent in it were just like any single-player Fallout game. Essentially, take Fallout 4, but imagine there are 10 or so players in random parts of the world, occasionally running past each other or happening to be on the same quest. In terms of gameplay itself, it really feels a lot like Fallout 4, but with quests that focus more on action instead of dialogue. Yeah, there's plot here, and it's a thing to keep you going, but in my opinion, it's a lot less interesting than prior Fallout stories. See, the game launched with no NPCs, and while I think it's better for having them now, it's kind of clear that this content isn't the focus and was put in to appease the critics more or less. The dialogue is pretty fucking boring, and the characters can be downright annoying. All that was bad in Fallout 4 is even worse here. But all the new things that were fun in Fallout 4 is made even better. To be honest, I think what Fallout 4 was moving towards actually makes a lot more sense here. The loot and shoot gameplay clicking into place when it's in the form of multiplayer, grindy, mindless fun. To briefly talk about the plot though, basically you leave your vault and are tasked with finding the overseer of your vault for instructions on what to do next. Once you do find her, you're set off on a series of tasks. But the real main plot here is about looking into the Scorched, a new enemy type that exists in the world. I mean, kinda. They're ghouls, basically, but here they have guns, which makes them pretty perfect enemies to plop across the map. A whole new variety of different Scorched enemies now exist, and the main plot, and this isn't really a spoiler because you'll likely run into it within like an hour or two of playing the game, but the main plot has you dropping a nuke to take out the Scorched for good. This results in a map-wide event, again, one you'll likely run into very early on, which has a certain section of the map nuked to shit. If you have power armor or a rad suit though, you can go into the explosion and find a boss of sorts in the Scorched Beast Queen, which takes a village to take down, but a bunch of people tend to gather for this event anyways as it drops a bunch of rare loot. And yeah, that's kind of the plot. There's no credit roll, no end screen. I mean, on that topic of Bethesda never wanting a game to end, this is that taken to its furthest degree, but it actually makes a lot more sense here in this context. I mean, don't get me wrong though, there's a lot to do here. There are factions here just like any Fallout game, all of which have their own kind of dulled down plot lines. There are other main missions which the Overseer sends you on too. In fact, she has a trail which leads pretty much across the entirety of the massive map. Bethesda knows exactly what this game is. You don't want to be held up in dialogue for 20 minutes if you're running around with some buddies. You want to get right to the meat. The quest design clearly shows this too. You know how every quest in a Bethesda game has you talking to a person to get a quest, going to the place and doing the thing, then returning to the person to get your reward? Well, a handful of the quests here streamline that even, where you get the reward the second you complete the objective. No need to return to the quest giver. Again, in the context of a single player Fallout, cutting down on dialogue might not be great, but here it works super well. You'll end up in a million quests very quickly, so the faster the better. An instant payoff feels pretty fucking good. While a lot is streamlined, some things are built out to a level they never have been before, with crafting and scrapping mechanics being one of the most notable positive changes. Here, you're incentivized not just to pick up any loose junk for crafting, but also to pick up every dropped gun that you're already using, even if it does less damage and comparatively sucks farts, because most of the time you scrap a given type of weapon, you get a mod for it. So, for example, you use the combat shotgun. Or, yeah, I mean, I use the combat shotgun, whatever. Well, to start, you have no mods for it. But each time you scrap another combat shotgun that you picked up fresh off the entrails of a slain enemy, still dripping a mix of blood and intestinal lining, you have a good shot of unlocking a new mod. With most guns having like 50 fucking mods, you can imagine this is a continued process. Gives you great incentive to take your time with looting and reasons to attack random enemy bases. Now I know what you're thinking. It's already hard enough to manage my inventory space with 3 guns. How the fuck can I pick up every single shotgun that I find? Well, to start, you might have to be a little picky, only holding 1 or 2 at a time, but the game turns its perk tree from Fallout 4 into the pretty engaging perk card system with a ton of upgrades and a lot of them focusing on inventory space, meaning you can eventually not only increase your actual weight limit, but also decrease the weight of certain guns and scrap. So if you, or me, or a combat shotgun enthusiast, you can focus on a perk card that decreases the weight of shotguns specifically. Problem solved. Now 5 shotguns weigh what 1 used to. This game easily has the best inventory management out of any Fallout and any Bethesda game for that matter in general. And even though the menus are mostly the same from Fallout 4, there's better ways to sort your items, and so many items are now weightless or at least decreased weight, meaning past the 15-hour mark, you're barely having to keep track of it. I don't mind some occasional management, but in a game that prioritizes looting and hoarding so much more than prior entries, this is a very natural progression. You see, typically, if somebody were describing a game to me and listed crafting as a part of it, I would immediately shit myself and run for my fucking life. But here, for some reason, it just works in a way that I found myself engaging with in a pretty positive way, targeting raider dens with no reason other than committing a minor massacre and picking up the leftover weapons to scrap. Primarily the scrap. I swear, look, the ripping men to shreds is like bottom on the list of the 2 reasons. I mean, I wouldn't just go do it for no reason, right? You believe me, right? Please don't tell mom, dude. I promise, I'm fine. It's not a problem. It's a part of the game. It's just what I was doing. Just don't worry. Please, bro, please don't tell mom. General scrap is found everywhere in the world, like in Fallout 4, making scavenging a constant task no matter where you are, not just limiting it to feeling up some dead bodies for a couple of caps. Part of what makes the scrapping a lot easier than in Fallout 4 is here there is no such thing as stealing. Walk into a town, you can take every single object that moves and nobody will bat an eye. Yeah, I know that seems like a crucial part of Bethesda games, especially if you're thinking of the sneaking in Skyrim and Oblivion, but in Fallout 4, stealth was starting to become a lot less useful, and the stealing issue became particularly annoying, often feeling at odds with the incentive to scrap everything you find. For example, you have a gun mod you've been trying to craft for a while now and you need more screws to make it, so eventually, while in Diamond City on a quest, maybe you come across an old desk fan, which, as you know, got some fucking tasty little screws in it. If you pick this up at the wrong time when someone is in the room with you, you'll immediately get attacked by everyone in fucking town. At this point, you're basically forced to reload your save and either decide not to try to take it, or wait until nobody is looking and then you stick every single loose mug in the entire fucking room in your pocket. Also, why the fuck would the police give a shit if you took an old-ass inoperable desk fan that nobody even fucking cares about? Imagine your friend is at your house and he takes a pencil and puts it in his pocket without asking. Would your response be to ask for it back? Or to sick the entire fucking town on him, forcing him to shoot past wave after wave of all of your friends, family, and neighbors, shooting them all to death, all in the name of that sweet fucking big number 2.
Baby, I can smell that lead just thinking about it.
In Fallout 76, where scrap is even more essential to the experience, this system is just gutted completely, meaning that there are no repercussions for taking anything from anywhere. That might seem like it would break immersion, but Fallout 76 is going for a different experience. You use junk and scrap not just to upgrade weapons, but to upgrade armor, repair the durability of weapons and armor, which can constantly break without your attention, and also to build. In this case, instead of building a whole community like in Fallout 4, building your camp. A little home you can build into many things, palaces, water parks, or, in my case, a dingy little fucking home. Your camp is open for other players to check out if they want to. In fact, all of the camps of every active player are marked on the map for anybody in the server to stop by and check out. It's actually a lot of fun roaming and checking out other people's creations here. Quite often, if I found myself near somebody else's camp, I'd go out of the way to check it out, to see what they got going on, play some of their mini games, or sometimes to use a crafting station when I couldn't find one nearby. It was also fun the few times other players stumbled upon my camp, emoting positively to show some appreciation and love that I've been seeking so goddamn hard since never getting it as a child. Please, dear God, leave a fucking like on this video. There aren't colonies to build here, but the amount of components for building has been significantly upgraded, meaning you can make more than a slightly nice looking shantytown. The map also, the map is an absolute behemoth. This time Bethesda decided not to tackle a city, but instead the entirety of fucking North Virginia. And it somehow feels just as well crafted as any Fallout map. For all I know, it could have been empty as hell at launch, but as of now, it's a dynamic and beautiful world to explore, taking the light shrubbery of Fallout 4 and taking that to its full conclusion, actually having lust flourishes in the same breath as radiated deserts. The online mechanics actually work really well here too. Around the map, random locations will have events, basically short, often timed quests that revolve around the theme of the area it takes place in. And these are server-wide and limited, meaning that at any point, if you check your map, there's a good shot a couple of players are in one right now. You can tap a single button to zap miles over to them and join in on whatever the fuck the quest is. Rebuilding a theme park, summoning Mothman, or shooting a shit ton of nuclear ghouls. This is an amazing mechanic in terms of bringing players together. I'll often be fighting alongside level 600 plus players, decked out in power armor and lightning explosive miniguns with shark teeth and a bunch of cocks hanging off the front, while my little baby ass runs around a skirt shooting one enemy 50 times with my dinky ass little shotgun to down them. But it's still fun, and even if I'm not able to do as much as my compatriots, I still feel a part of a community. The events often have rare drops or crafting materials, meaning there's a lot of incentive to join in for anyone at any level. On top of this, there are expeditions, missions that fly you away on a vertibird to a new location, completing a much harder, longer, and
girthier mission in a new area.
So far, there are two major locations to get expedited shipping to. The Pit, aka Pittsburgh from Fallout 3 DLCs, and Atlantic City, one which was just added a few months back. These expeditions in general were only added to the game in 2022, 4 full years after release. And the expeditions are pretty fun. Although in my experience joining random very high level guys online, it seems eventually you just kind of grind these missions as quickly as you can to get the loot. Each quest, from my understanding, takes around an hour, with 3 new free-to-play quests in each location, so 6 total. 6 hours of content for free is pretty nice, but on top of that, each quest seems to have a bunch of randomized objectives, and all of them have some unique loot, meaning they're made to be replayed and grinded, and you have good reason to do so. This idea is pretty sick. When I first saw the pits mentioned in the game, I figured, oh well, no way they'd take you there or anything, probably just fun reference, and how wrong I was. How wrong I was in general is the feeling I have on Fallout 76. Even though I clearly have like 500 fucking hours of gameplay before I could call myself a real Mothman truther, I think I can honestly say that this game is maybe better than Fallout 4. Well, maybe that's a stretch, but in a weird way, this game makes more sense than Fallout 4 for me. Fallout 4 feels stuck halfway between the mindless shooting of this game and the more centered story approach of Fallout 3 or New Vegas. Putting it next to 76, it actually makes things click for me a lot easier. I genuinely thought this game would be a big fucking pile of dookie doo-doo, an insult to a Fallout fan like me. Bad enough to make a gamer consider touching grass before loading their favorite cozy MMO tentacle hentai game and cracking open the next Mountain Dew. Remember how I talked about how Fallout 4 was trying to make America better again? Well, that is only highlighted tenfold here. There's a hell of a lot more Americana in this game. The whole thing screams July 4th, which, again, considering that the first few Fallouts were really poking fun at American ideals and the illusion of comfort in earlier America, it really feels like a very odd misinterpretation of what Fallout was supposed to be. Here, we have a celebration of America. Settler colonists around the map in random spots who are building new homes. It's a very positive message for Fallout, and especially when you compare it to the dark nihilism in Fallout 2, it's clear that somewhere along the line, Fallout has started to mean many different things to many different people. But all that being said, as a Fallout fan, I'm quite mad at myself that I really let this one fall through the cracks, as there's so much here to enjoy. Sure, there's bad, and if a fan comes here looking for more of what they loved in older Bethesda games, they really might leave sorely disappointed. But I think this game would actually appeal to a lot of people who haven't thought twice about trying it themselves. Maybe it's better I waited, but I see this game being one I revisit for a while, as I still feel like I've barely scratched the surface, even after 65 hours of playing. If you're a Fallout fan like me, do yourself a favor and check it out. And if you have any casual gamer friends who aren't into the franchise, I actually think playing this game with them would be as good of an intro to Fallout as any. Okay, let's just do a little recap moment here and see what the point of any of this fucking shit was. God damn, bro, I'd fuck up some Taco Bell right now. Oh! Hey there, didn't see ya. How's it going, folks? Poke. Hey! Hi! You know, it's been a while. About 4 months, in fact, since I recorded the rest of this video. Turns out editing an hour and a half of green screen footage takes a pretty fucking long time. And I'm the dumbass who thought I could just wrap the whole video in like 2 weeks. Anyways, I did in fact record an outro on green screen for this video, but I just didn't feel like it wrapped everything up the way that I wanted it to, so that brings us here today. First off, there's a few things I want to correct the record on. For one, way back in the intro of this video, I was close but a little bit off in terms of the history of Fallout Online and the closing of Interplay Entertainment. Originally, I had thought that Fallout Online was being developed while Interplay went bankrupt, and that the bankruptcy forced them to cancel the project, but that actually isn't true at all. What actually happened is Interplay was slowly bleeding money for a long time. The top-down RPGs that Interplay was once known for just weren't the cash cows that they once were, with games like Fallout and Baldur's Gate losing capital very quickly to the increasingly popular and accessible console market. Fallout Brotherhood of Steel was a failed attempt at bridging that gap, and it's possible that Project Van Buren could have done the job better, kind of seeing to take the top-down RPG but mixing it with more accessible gameplay, kind of like what Baldur's Gate 3 looks like today. But it was taking too long in development because the scope and the gameplay kept shifting. Interplay didn't have money for it anymore, and they decided to cut Baldur's Gate 3 and Van Buren and fired all of the developers working internally at their studio. Even that 3-game deal that they had signed with Bethesda was not good enough to keep them afloat. So on the 29th of November in 2006, they announced bankruptcy. And the very next day, announced Fallout Online. Obviously, they were lacking funding for that kind of thing due to their fucking bankruptcy, but they went to Bethesda and they said, "Hey Bethesda, we got a deal for you." All right, forget about that 3-game deal we talked about a little while back. We're gonna give you Fallout completely. You own the franchise, all right? It's yours. But you do have to license us the rights to make just one game, just one. It'll be an MMO called Fallout Online. Classic move on Interplay's part, the old go to your ex's house and beg to stay over for just one night. Because yeah, I did quit drinking, all right? That smell, that's my new cologne that I'm using, right? You know, they'd be making them funky as hell these days. You can't blame me for that. And yeah, I have a job. I'm a children's entertainer. And I swear to God, I am about to get promoted, all right? Just as soon as I take out that goddamn fucking rat. I know he has pictures. I know he has videos, but I'm gonna handle it. I'm gonna take care of it. And yeah, I still have a car. It's in the shop right now. It got totaled. And you know, I don't totally know how, but I swear it's that goddamn rat. He took it for a fucking joyride, right? That rodent, fuck. And I'm gonna catch him, all right? And I'm gonna pay off the car and it's all gonna be good, right? Baby, I'm on the right path. I swear to God, I'm a changed man. All right, just one or two nights. Much like that old reliable ex, Bethesda begrudgingly agreed, but they did sign it with quite a few caveats. A few being that within 2 years of signing the agreement, Interplay would have to secure $30 million in funding and have started full-scale development of the game. And the game would have to launch within 4 years of securing that funding. And Bethesda would still get 12% of all of the potential revenue, so not a bad deal for them. Well, 2 years went by, and while some light gameplay footage had allegedly been recorded and Interplay had supposedly found a developer in Masthead Studios, the game clearly had not started full-scale development. Or at least that's what Bethesda would argue, as within a couple months, Bethesda started a lawsuit against Interplay to stop any further development of the game. Bethesda needed this case done quickly and efficiently, so they hired the top of the top in the young, budding attorney, Phoenix Wright. After finding a cryptic, wrinkled-up note in the women's restroom of Interplay Studios, and after carrying out a absolutely brutal cross-examination of Interplay's pet parrot, Wally Walnuts, Phoenix was able to definitively conclude that the game had not yet reached full-scale development. Unfortunately, moments after this revolutionary trial, Phoenix was arrested on his third DUI charge. This time causing a traffic collision so bad that it caused thousands of innocent civilians to lose their lives in one fell swoop, causing the collapse of 3 major bridges and somehow an entire interstate highway. Interplay enacted the old DUI loophole here, managing to invalidate all of the attorney's prior charges and causing Bethesda to completely rethink their legal strategy. Luckily for Bethesda, Professor E. Gadd was available now that whole Snapchat thing cleared up. And look, I don't want to get political here, but can I just be clear? I always believe the guy. I mean, just look at him, look at that face. Anyways, a whole 3 years later in 2012, and at this point, 6 years after Interplay's bankruptcy in 2006, the case was finally settled between the two, with Bethesda giving Interplay $2 million to buy back the rights to Fallout Online and have the IP be exclusively theirs. Interplay used this large sum of capital to completely revolutionize their studio, realizing some of the most impactful games of the 2010s, such as Prehistoric Man, Pinball Yeah, Death in the Fly, and most importantly, Crazy Cat's Love, which, let's be honest, dude, Elden Ring ripped off way too fucking blatantly. I mean, Miyazaki? More like Jizz Bukkake, am I right? Alright, so all that being said, is it a coincidence that Fallout 76 started being worked on right when Bethesda got the rights to Fallout Online? Maybe. Could we still see a true Fallout MMO developed by a third party, similar to what Bethesda did with Elder Scrolls Online? Yeah, possibly. It's interesting to think about how Fallout Online could have impacted the franchise, if it would have caused the game to reach higher heights even faster, but I guess we'll never know. Another thing that I'd like to correct the record on in the video is that I kind of claimed that crafting was an entirely new thing to Fallout 4. Fallout 3 and New Vegas do in fact have crafting. It's just a much smaller and more basic component of the game. Ammo crafting is certainly useful in 3 and New Vegas, but gun mods are pretty rare and certainly less fleshed out than Bethesda made them in Fallout 4. In retrospect, it's kind of clear that Bethesda wanted to move in this direction for a while, and I usually just avoid crafting, so I kind of just missed this entirely. I'd also like to quickly go back to Fallout 1 and 2, and my claim that 2 is easier to get into. On reflection, if you're looking to get into these old games, which to be honest, I only really recommend if you have the patience for old PC games that might require a lot of backtracking and Googling, Fallout 1 is probably a better entry. I think part of the reason 2 was easier for me to get into was just because I had tried 1 so many times that I had figured out the basics. As I mentioned earlier in the video, Fallout 2 does have more of a true tutorial than Fallout 1, but it's still pretty bare bones, and you could definitely get all of the information from it from like a 5-minute YouTube video. Fallout 1 is a lot shorter, and while there's certainly a sharper late game difficulty spike, in retrospect, I kind of wish I had just done more Googling and started here. Either is probably fine to start with though, so you know what, fuck me, you do you, alright? You do you. You know, and sometimes I wish I could be like the old cranky gamers waving their shotgun around on their porch at any passing children, screaming about how the old Fallouts were better, but after playing both and replaying the new ones, I just don't agree. The endings of the stories of the first 2 are maybe stronger and more interesting than the endings of the newer Fallouts, but getting there requires a lot of, sorry, but boring-ass gameplay and a lot of frustratingly directionless moments, at least by modern gaming standards. Maybe that's just me though, you know? I don't know. So go ahead and make your 4chan thread about how the new generation of gamers are cucked, but you know, leave that goddamn gatekeeping out of my fucking comments, right? We don't take kindly to that bullshit over here. So yeah, you know, they're good and all, but let's not pretend New Vegas and even 4 isn't superior in most ways that make a game fun from a moment-to-moment gameplay perspective. Jurassic Park might have been revolutionary, but fuck it, man, strap me into an electric chair with Fury Road on 5 times speed. I'm trying to fucking feel something. All right, let's just back that ass up a little bit and recap what we've been talking about today. What was the point of any of this shit? Interplay and Black Isle built the foundations of a now legendary sci-fi franchise with the original Fallout games. These games are RPGs with a capital R and a capital P and a capital G. Your choices impact the game in a pretty profound way. If you have low intelligence, you might literally only have the option of responding with ugh to half of the dialogue. Bethesda gets the rights to make a few Fallout games, and eventually the full rights to the entire franchise. They start by creating Fallout 3, which on release was often touted as Oblivion with guns. It was made in the same engine, and so it had a similar look and feel, and had a similar split focus on storytelling through the dialogue and through the world and environment. It brought a ton of new fans to Fallout, and set the franchise on the path that it's been on since. About a year after Fallout 3 came out, Bethesda hired a smaller studio, Obsidian Entertainment, experiment to make Fallout New Vegas. Obsidian had some members from the original team at Black Isle who made Fallout 1 and 2, so they sought to bring the game back to its foundations. In New Vegas, you can make radical decisions, much like in Fallout 1 and 2, but the difference comes in that these smaller decisions within a city can in some cases have impact on the entire larger game world. Because factions are all over the map and seeking territory everywhere, your decisions are not isolated. It often feels like the game reacts to you in a way that nothing else in the series truly does. The writing here is also probably the sharpest in this series, especially in the DLCs. Fallout 4 released a whole 5 years after New Vegas. Riding off the insane success of Skyrim, Fallout 4 sought to re-envision the gameplay of Fallout a little further. While basic crafting existed in prior entries, here it was expanded to a massive degree, and a rather large system of base building was added to the game, allowing players to make a fucked up Deadly Sims type experience. The game had pretty positive reception that eventually gave way to mixed reactions from the wider community. Fallout 4 really caused a split in the Fallout franchise. The purists of the universe not a fan of the shifted focus, but the hardcore Bethesda fans were mostly pleased. I also made note here of the DLC for Fallout 4 Far Harbor, and the reason for doing so was that any of the possible complaints about the core story of Fallout 4 being a bit without direction and at points uninteresting. Far Harbor proves that there are writers at Bethesda who know how to make good sci-fi, who know how to take a concept further along its path. They certainly could have taken it even further, but Far Harbor has 8 different endings, all of which have their own level of moral complexity, and it bears the question of why the core stories can't have that level of interesting conclusiveness. It's frustrating to see some of the best and most interesting content across the board in the modern Fallout games locked behind DLCs that the majority of Day 1 gamers may never see. Despite any of the kind of pushback from hardcore fans, Fallout 4 sold incredibly well for Bethesda and reviewed very well too, so they naturally sought to push all of the new crafting and building systems that they had built in Fallout 4 even further in the next entry, Fallout 76. Fallout 76, the disaster, the end of Bethesda. Bethesda has actually damn near reinvented the entire game at this point, adding back in NPCs, crafting entirely new areas and missions, constantly adding new things for players to toy with, and most importantly, grinding out all the bugs that plagued it at launch. Unfortunately for Bethesda, though, seemingly the damage has been done, and unlike the willingness of the hardcore gamer club to revisit and praise a Cyberpunk and a No Man's Sky, Fallout 76 is yet to have a major flip in public opinion. It seems some of the most vocal people just assume it sucks, despite never touching it. And let me be clear, that is not to say that this is a perfect game, but at this point it knows what it is, and it does that thing pretty well. I legitimately think there's an argument to be made that simply from a gameplay perspective, without mods, Fallout 76 is the most fun you can actively have in any Bethesda game, and you can have that fun with your friends too. The story is mid, the writing is pretty bad, the factions are uninspired, and the world feels the least Fallout of any of the games here, but regardless, it's been crafted into an incredibly fun game to mess around in. And that brings us to now. When I recorded the rest of this video, it was about a month before the show came out, and somehow I thought I could finish editing it before the show dropped, despite working a full-time fucking job. The show has attracted an absolutely massive new audience to the world. I mean, I talked to my parents the other week, and they told me they were watching this little show called Fallout, as if my bitch ass hasn't been playing these games since I was in fucking middle school. The show, well, I'm not really gonna get into the show here, but Fallout could easily be on the precipice of becoming an even larger franchise than it already is, and I know Bethesda is hard at work on a new Elder Scrolls game, but god damn boy, y'all better be whipping up something Fallout, because a ton of gamers who never touched the franchise before are hungry for something, and Fallout 4 getting a next-gen update that essentially just broke everybody's mods is only gonna feed the hungry for so damn long. Todd, time to bust those udders out and milk them dry, boy. Baby gotta eat. Where will the franchise go? Is there a true Fallout MMO on the way? Is it gonna be a single player Fallout 5 coming down the pipeline? Or are we gonna get a Fallout Shelters remastered with added season passes and fucking loot boxes before any of that? Season 2 of the show is already on the way, and with some links to New Vegas being teased, a remaster now that Bethesda and Oblivion are both owned by Microsoft would be pretty fucking cool. I mean, in those Microsoft leaks that happened about a year ago, it was said that there was gonna be a Fallout 3 remastered coming out sometime this year, and where the fuck is that? That'd be cool too. Well, in recent, there's been a lot of criticism of Bethesda with Fallout 76 and Starfield, and I wanted to see if we could use Fallout to find a direct path of how Bethesda's games have changed, or I suppose to see if they've changed at all. I think the largest issue we can fault Bethesda with on these entries, and the reason that Fallout 4 or 76 feels so dull in comparison, is the scope of the games constantly increasing to a degree that's harmful to creativity. Fallout 3 was touted as having a record-breaking amount of voiced dialogue options, with 40,000 lines of spoken dialogue. New Vegas, despite feeling smaller in some ways, broke that record a year later with 65,000 lines. Skyrim had about 60,000, so actually less than New Vegas. Fallout 4 had 110,000 lines of dialogue, more than 3 in Skyrim combined, and Starfield had 250,000 lines of spoken dialogue, literally over 6 times the amount of dialogue even written for Fallout 3. Now, this in and of itself is not necessarily a problem, right? New Vegas had more dialogue than 3, but was written expertly. The issue isn't just that Bethesda is exponentially expanding their dialogue systems. The problem is that Bethesda is exponentially expanding the scope of the world itself, of the items and the loot, of the crafting and the building, and when you're putting so much time in all these different directions, what you'll end up with is something that on paper is a lot bigger, but actually kind of feels smaller. Fallout 4's world feels bigger for sure, don't get me wrong, but I don't think the doubled amount of dialogue from New Vegas is really felt. When all of the dialogue sounds and feels exactly the same, it doesn't really end up feeling like there's more. New Vegas feels like it has more dialogue just because the dialogue there is more memorable. Scope creep is a very real thing, and if there's any particular accusation that I feel we could levy towards Toddward and his time as King Supreme, this would probably be the one, given that every single game under his rule seems to be impacted by this issue. Bethesda wants to make bigger and bigger sandboxes, but the effect of that is that the foundation of the sandbox becomes less and less believable. If attention only goes towards how to make the sandbox bigger and more interactive, you might find yourself lacking a reason to visit the sandbox in the first place. The world of Fallout 4, and 76 for that matter, is a much more generic and digestible version of the world from Fallout 1 and 2. Feral ghouls are fun to fight, but they're basically just zombies, and spammed around to the point that their dark significance to the lore gets kind of lost and muddled. It's just another freak to shoot at. That massive list of intersecting factions from New Vegas is almost entirely folded down into raiders, just bad guys with heads that pop off like a fucking champagne bottle. This seems to be the trade-off that Bethesda has chosen. A certain section of gamers will really love New Vegas, but pretty much any gamer who can figure out how to pull a fucking trigger could sink some time into 76. It's digestible, fun, easy to hop into, easy to play in the background while you talk with friends, and as a result, pretty forgettable. If we're isolating the games down to how fluid and fun the experience is, each game is a better one than the last. But in that argument, Candy Crush is the best fucking game ever made. I think if there's something that we could really ask of Bethesda here, it's to slow the fuck down. Please, please, for the love of God, do not try to make the next Fallout game have more dialogue than Starfield. I really don't think any fan of the series would ask for a bigger map or more dialogue over a stronger focus on quality of dialogue and more fleshed out characters to interact with that really let you feel the weight of all of your decisions. All that being said, I'll play whatever the next Fallout game is. And I'm fairly certain that I'll enjoy it. I'll probably have some complaints about Season 2 of the show, but I'll still watch it. You got me, Todd? I am in your arms. And all I ask is that you hold me a little more gently and stop trying to grab my fucking crotch. Hi, I'm still here. Just give me a couple more minutes, all right? I promise I'll make it quick. First off, I really just want to say thank you for watching. This video has been a brutal undertaking, an insane amount of editing and writing, and knowing someone out there is watching it and hopefully enjoying it really does mean the world. I mentioned it earlier in this video, but when this was originally written, it was only meant to be half of a video that was entirely about Starfield. I'm gonna be working on that second half soon, so please, 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 if you have any interest in that, hit me with a little subscribe, maybe a bell click to get some notification. If you're willing, sharing this video in your Discord or in your family group chat along with this picture of furry Joe Biden smoking a fat one would mean the world. I had a blast making this, and the more attention this video gets, the better an excuse I have as to why I've been ditching all of my friends lately. I think there's a lot of work still I can do on the editing and especially the writing front, making things more concise, so keep an eye out, give me a little sub love, that's all I ask. I'd also like to take a very quick moment to thank some of the people whose content I stole for this, namely the musician and game developer CongusBongus, who's lovely enough to allow their music to be used royalty-free. He'll be linked in the description along with all the other music I used in here, including those Fallout trap remixes I briefly used, so if you're interested, please go check those out and support some small creators. More to come, my friends, very soon. And yeah, that's it. This time we can actually end the video. You can go on with your life, and I'll be stuck editing more videos. Well, bye-bye. Bye-bye-bye-bye. Bye.
Oh, Nick Valentine, you're a detective like no other, with your mechanical heart beating undercover. Your gaze is soft, your touch is hard and metallic. You make my heart beat in my talons. In this city full of sin and lies, you take down the baddest of guys. Your trench coat swings as you walk the streets, solving crimes. Oh, you're so sexy and sweet. Oh, Nick Valentine, solve the mystery of my heart. Break through my walls, let your love tear me apart. Your charm is undeniable, your touch so electric. I want you to feel me up, doesn't feel so synthetic. Heart, baby. Your charm is undeniable, your touch so electric. I want to feel me up, doesn't feel so synthetic.